Well, hello, my friends. Super happy to connect here with you today. Welcome to the Artist Next Level podcast. Today, I have a good friend of mine coming into the show. We're going to talk about the emerging artists in 2022. What does that mean in the world today? And with me, I have Victoria J. Fry. She is the founder of the New Visionary magazine and also the Visionary Art Collective and a lot of really cool things that they do and she has been doing for the last few years, I would say, and we're gonna have a great chat talking and diving into that.
Resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Victoria, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, Sergio. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just so thrilled to be here and to chat with you today. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a great chat. You are no foreign to this podcast. And, it's great to have you back and chat a little bit about the things that you are doing right now. Talk about also the emerging artists, in 2022, what does that mean? How the world has changed? I haven't talked about this topic in a while, so I'm really looking forward to talking about that with you because you have a great community of artists. You've really been working with a lot of emerging artists, emerging talent. And, we also, I don't know how many years gap we have between both of us. We're not going to say, but I assume it's quite a bit. So I'm always, interested of learning, how each of the various generations, how we move, how we change. The world in which I was an emerging artist in my 20s, 30s is very different to now as I'm in my 50s, and the world has changed and continues to change. So it's exciting and I'm looking forward to chat. But before we do get into that topic, Victoria, tell me a little bit about, for our friends who have no idea, who you are, give us a quick, update on your background because you are also an artist. So tell me a little bit about that, how you came into the Visionary Art Collective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super excited to dive into that topic as well. So I am Victoria. I'm an artist. I'm the founder of VAC and New Visionary Mag, which is our most recent project.
Mm-hmm.
And, VAC for me was really born out of a need for an art community.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a few different places. I was born in England. I lived in Singapore during my childhood. I moved to New York. I went to art school in New York City, where I currently live. And I also lived out in California for 5 years, in San Francisco and Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen a lot of different kinds of art communities. And I've always just, from a really young age, been completely obsessed with everything related to art, from making art to visiting galleries and museums. I remember even as a child, going to contemporary art galleries was one of my favorite things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew from a really young age that I was going to be an artist. I was going to go to art school and all of that. But even though I went to a really incredible art school in Manhattan, and then I got my master's from Maine College of Art, which was also a great experience, I found myself feeling really disconnected, especially once I graduated. I felt like I did not really belong to an art community. I lacked a lot of resources and practical skills in terms of how to advance, really even start my art career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt really lost. And I realized, I thought it was just me, and that every artist around me was kind of making strides, but, somehow I couldn't get there. And I realized that it was because I was not engaging with other artists.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just lacked those fundamental skills that you really need to start a successful and sustainable art career. So something I've been talking a lot about recently is how from the time that I graduated, which was 10 years ago, to where I'm at now, I really spent so much time just investing in my learning, taking workshops and classes and mentorship programs, and
Mm-hmm.
really just learning as much as I possibly could about how to make an art career. And now with Visionary Art Collective, one of our main branches is our mentorship program.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so fortunate. I work with many artists every week, all different career levels, but many of them are emerging artists. So again, really looking forward to diving into that topic today and helping to support them and share things that I've learned. But that is really how VAC came to be. It was about 2.5 years ago, even before the pandemic hit. I was writing a blog, and the blog started to get some traction. And I thought I can either keep this going as a blog, or I can turn it into something that will have a greater impact. And so that's when I launched VAC.
That's awesome. I love it. I think you and I, we have a lot of things in common, and that's kind of where we connect. Like, we actually, feel like we've known each other for a while, and we get excited for the projects that you are doing and that I'm doing. Because I think we both had that kind of like desire when we were in art school, like there's gotta be something else, right? I can do something else. Yeah. Art making, of course, that comes from the heart, something that will follow us wherever we go. But maybe there's something else we can do. There's this other aspect. There's what happens to the art when it leaves the studio and then enters the world, right? And I think another thing that I see that you and I, we have a lot in common is the idea of community. We both love people and being around people and being in community and helping our communities grow. In a community, you are not just trying to see how everybody else can serve you, but in a real community, it's like, how can we serve each other so that we can grow together, right? And I think that, you and I, we have chat this idea of, when one of your artists in your community succeeds, you succeed too, and others succeed, because when one of us wins, we all win. And I think there's so much value in that. And I think, that's why I'm super excited that we can have this chat. And let's dive into this idea of the emerging artist. And let me first define how I define an emerging artist for the sake of the podcast. A lot of times when we hear emerging artists, we disqualify ourselves. Well, I'm already 30 or 40 or 50, emerging artists, well, a lot of times is thought as a younger person. Well, I would like to define it as somebody of any age who feels he or she, is ready to really take on into their career, push it forward, maybe right after school, maybe a self-taught artist, working independently. Maybe somebody who had another career and then now is just deciding to get into it, after doing something else. And I find that doesn't matter the age, is the idea of where you feel you are in your art career, that you say, well, yes, I think I'm an emerging artist. And actually I was looking the other day, looking back at the pandemic, some of my posts during the pandemic, and in one post I had put kind of like a little quote, like, if you think about it, during the pandemic, we are all emerging artists, because we are all stuck together in one of our homes. Nobody has the advantage of, I have a show, all right, because we are all stuck, particularly those few months of the pandemic. So, at some point or another, we all have been, or in different situations, we may be emerging artists. And I would love to dive in with you. If you can share, you have put together some 4 really great pieces of advice for us that I would love to dive in. So go ahead, take us to the first one. Victoria, let's dive in.
Yes. Okay. So I was thinking about this prior to our podcast today, and I was thinking, okay, if I had to narrow it down, because there are so many tips and strategies, right, that we share with emerging artists. And actually, the first one was kind of born out of our conversation that we had the other week, which is how important it is to create work that is truly aligned to you and work that excites you. Because I think that, so many artists, and I know that I went through this while I was in art school, go through a period, not everyone, but I mean, I certainly went through, and I think it's very common, where we create work that we feel like we should be making, or we create work that we think is, going to be trendy in galleries. And, it's very easy to fall into that. But I think the first thing that every artist should do is to really go deep and think, what am I excited about? And create work from that place of authenticity, because that is when your unique voice is going to, come out. And that would be the first piece of advice that I would give. And it takes time to get there. And sometimes it takes trying out a lot of different styles and techniques to get there. But ultimately, you will get there if you just keep going.
I love that. I love that. That's a good. And I think especially when you think about in the morning, we take our phones, we open it up, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you're at, and you see what everybody else is doing, right? And then, maybe somewhere you're gonna become like somebody you're looking at, or you walk in the studio like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And at some point maybe starts to become more about wanting to create something that is not, as you said, aligned or necessarily true to us just because we want to be part of something else or fit within a certain market, or certain gallery that you may want to approach or whatnot. So I think that's a very important one. And I don't know if you feel that pressure from artists, that you talk to. I certainly feel it as an artist myself, going into social media, like, oh, wow, well, it tends to influence, how we make art, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's also nothing wrong with,
Exactly.
Finding artists who inspire you and saving their work and looking at their work. In fact, I think that that's all part of the journey to finding your authentic voice. For me, it actually started with looking at art and seeing what resonated with me and thinking, oh my goodness, I want to create work like that. I feel so connected to that painting or this artist's work. It's, stirring something inside of me. And then, you kind of pull from that place, and what comes out is your authentic take on whatever that is. It's like if you're a landscape painter, maybe you see landscape work and you feel really inspired by it, but then you think, what can I bring, to this realm of landscape? And so I think that it's part of the journey, but there's definitely a pressure to, if you see a really successful artist on Instagram, well, maybe I need to paint like them. I think that's when you kind of have to regroup and go back to yourself and what feels right for you. Because anytime we're painting or making art or really doing anything just for external validation, we're never going to be happy, and we're not going to grow creatively that way. So yeah, the first thing is just is getting clear on your voice and truly it's a work in progress, and sometimes your voice grows and evolves over time, and that's okay too. And knowing that it's a journey. Sometimes I think I was reading about the artist Alex Katz recently, and I can't remember the number, but it was like, he said that when he graduated from art school, he burned like over 150 paintings or something like that. I don't remember what the exact number was, until he felt like he was creating work that was truly authentic to him. Wow. And so it's a process, but honoring that process and giving yourself time to explore that.
I love that. I've never gone to the extreme of burning them, but what I often do is today the art supplies are too expensive, right? So
oh yeah, absolutely.
I think we all have been in a place in which, like, this is just not. So you re-gesso the thing over and start from scratch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's very normal. Sometimes it's just looking at a piece for a few days. The other thing I don't want to digress too much, but that's been helpful for me lately is in my studio, if I have my artwork hanging on the wall, I was looking at it for several days and I really loved the direction it was heading in, but I felt like it wasn't quite there. So I ended up just, like you said, just gessoing over it. And then about a week later, I thought, you know what? I really miss that painting. I'm going to repaint it, but I'm going to do it a little bit. I thought I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And what I ended up producing, I really loved. And so sometimes that can be a test too, is, if you paint over something, if you find yourself being called back to it, then it's a very intuitive process. But then I realized, okay, I'm so glad that I painted that. I love that painting. I didn't realize it at the time because I gessoed over it. But now I'm going to revisit it with a slightly new perspective. So I think part of it too, finding your authentic voice, is being really in tune with what feels right and what doesn't. And sometimes it takes painting over a painting to realize that actually the idea you had in the beginning was the right one, but maybe now it's just a matter of revisiting it from a slightly different angle or a slightly different lens.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great piece of advice, and I love that. I think that's awesome. All right, so let's go to the second one. What's your second word of advice?
Okay, so the second one is working in collections, which has been really helpful for me because
Okay.
I find this with a lot of artists I work with, and it's definitely something I experienced when I was younger, which is that, especially while I was in art school, I was so excited that I wanted to paint everything. And there's nothing wrong with that. But once I started shifting my approach to working in collections, it gave my art practice a focus,
Mhm.
which allowed me to kind of decide upon a concept, a theme, an idea, and really see it all the way through.
Mhm.
And there's a quote that I love that I often share in my workshops by the artist Michael Kalmbach. And he says, "How much mileage can I get out of a single idea?" And so he was talking about, when he has a concept or an idea for a new series, a new collection, he really pushes it and stretches it as far as it can go.
Mhm.
So now when I work in collections and maybe I'll create 3 or 4 collections a year, or, it's different for every artist. And obviously it depends how time consuming it is and how much, how many pieces you're going to have in each collection and that sort of thing, those logistics. But when you start to work in collections, I really do feel that there's, like I said, this focus that comes into play, and you can still paint and sketch other things, other kinds of subject matter, and but so I guess what I'm really trying to say here is that it's helpful to have, I think, 2 branches of your creative practice. One are the collections that you're working in, and that you are leading with,
Mhm.
and kind of sharing with the public. And that's all part of, developing your voice and putting that out, with sharing it with the world. But then I think it's also important, because that brings so much focus to your practice, because you don't want to feel creatively stifled or limited.
Mhm.
What's helpful for me, and I'm trying to get into a little bit more consistent practice doing this now, is to still sketch and paint and, anything that I feel inspired by, but to keep some of that private for me.
Mhm.
And I think having that balance is when a lot of creative growth really happens, and that's what I've experienced.
I love that. I love that, and I'm totally with you on the collections or series. That's something that I love to do in my own studio practice, where precise for that idea. I like to go the like deep versus wide, right? Like you have something
Yeah,
you want to explore. One painting is like one sentence, and then two
yeah.
paintings become 2 sentences. If I really want to express an idea, I have to write an essay, or I have to write, something that's thoughtful from sentence to sentence. And that's kind of like the way I see a collections or a series where, if I were to just do one, it's just like I'm just shooting out one sentence. and
Yeah.
it might be a good sentence, but it might not tell, I'm sure I could say more about it if I continue in that process. And it's totally something that I think artists who go in that direction, as you mentioned, helps to really go in depth into the subjects that we want to explore. And I totally love this one. I think it's really good, and I really like your idea too of if you're working on a collection or a series, then have something on the side, because we are always uh, very like intrigued minds as artists.
Mhm.
We are always thinking of other things as well, to have a place where we can also explore those ideas, right? It's,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I think that's really fun, and that's really good. Something that I've done with collections, the biggest collection I've ever done is 64 pieces. I once did a series
Wow.
that it was called it's a fun story. It was really quickly, it was called 41 winters when I turned 41. So I did one painting for each winter, a little one, 12 by 12. They were kind of abstract. They had coffee smell, I used like coffee stain, and it was really fun. And I based it on a poem. So I got so much until I got to the 41 painting, like I gotta keep going. I still have more to say on this series. So I wait all the way to 64 of them. I was a little bit
Oh my God.
carried away. But it was necessary, as an artist. I felt like 41, even though that's the kind of like the number I put myself as the cap, it wasn't enough to finish my thoughts or what I wanted to do with that series. So that's why I love this one. Victoria, I think that's a really, really good one.
Yeah, and Sergio, I love so much what you said about, it's like writing a sentence. It doesn't tell the
Mhm.
whole story.
Mhm.
And going deep versus wide. I think that's such
Yeah.
a perfect way to put it because when you create a series, a collection, you take that idea, you see
Mhm.
it all the way through. And oftentimes, I'm sure you experience this too, when you're halfway through that collection, an idea will spark for the next collection,
Yes. Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
a really beautiful thing. So that's something I would encourage artists to do. And it's important because it also creates that consistency in your work.
Mhm.
And a lot of emerging artists will ask me that, they'll say, I'm feeling a little bit scattered. I want to paint anything and everything. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
How do I kind of bring some organization into my work? So yeah, I
Mhm.
think cohesive collections is really important.
Yes, and also in a practical way, when you have to put them in your website, there you go. It gives you a perfect way to organize your website by collections.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Way to make sense out of your production as an artist. Awesome. Well, we're halfway, and these are so good. Can't wait to hear the next two. So let's go with number 3. What's the third one, Victoria?
Okay, so the third one is to really think about the way you are presenting your work to the audience, which is a little bit more of a practical strategy, but it's so important because, Sergio, when I look back on some of the images
Mm-hmm.
that I took of my early paintings and shared on my website, on social media, they weren't that great. The lighting was a little bit off and the photos were a bit grainy. And I was wondering all the time why I wasn't getting traction or making sales or, getting into some of the exhibits that I was really excited about. And a really big realization that I had was, the people who are receiving the images of my work on the other end,
Mm-hmm.
this is all they have to go by are the images.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's nothing, sure, sometimes, especially if you live in a major city, a potential collector or a curator might do a studio visit with you and see your work in person, which is always ideal. But a lot of times people are buying your work and, you know, viewing your work based on the images you are providing. So again, a little bit more of a practical strategy here, but I think it's really important and 100% worth the time and the investment that it takes to properly photograph your work. And it does not always mean that you have to hire a professional photographer. That's an option. But I've always taken images of my paintings on my own. I've just been really intentional with the kind of camera that I'm using. The lighting is really crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, I share also in my workshops that I will take 20 to 30 or more images of just a single painting and really meticulously go through them until I find the one that I feel comfortable posting to my website. Because how you present your work also it shows that you're taking pride in your work to present it in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think this is so important, especially in 2022, right? Which I exactly what I wanted to talk about, as pertaining to the emerging artists. And the reality is that all these apply to everybody, not only emerging, but for the purpose of the topic. But yeah, we live in 2022. This is not 1986, right? So the way we take our pictures is so important. The way we present ourselves to the public so important. It's a different world, and either you learn to uh, put yourself out there in the way the best fits for your work, or you'll get lost. You will not be seen. Your art will just not have the visibility that you want, because we're not being careful with that. And it just it's incredible. When you think about it, the quality of the camera in those little phones that we have, that today there's no excuse for somebody not taking good pictures of their artwork.
Yeah.
There's no excuse anymore, because hey, you cannot afford good lights, just go outside. The sunshine is free, and
Yeah.
go on an early morning out when the light is really soft, bring your art outside, take some good pictures. I have done, some really good pictures just with my phone, and that
Yeah.
I've used for catalogs because I didn't have anything else. And we just have to be resourceful, and that's so important. How we present ourselves. It's I love what you said about what somebody may have at their fingertips is just one picture that we posted, and that's it.
Yeah.
In order to find out if they want to follow us or they want to connect us or if they want to purchase that work of art or invite you for a show or do something. It's just that one image. And I think that, for you, Victoria, as you guys are also working with the New Visionary magazine, which we'll talk about in a minute as well, when you are calling artists for submissions and looking at working with artists and for the purposes of the magazine, the quality of the image is super important, isn't it?
It is the most important. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just as important as the artwork itself.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have to think if this is going in our magazine, it becomes a reflection of us as a company.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's even through that process, I've realized even further, like this is so, so pivotal. And there have been times where, we've seen work that was super high. So the work itself was super high quality, but the images just weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it makes it difficult to publish it in the magazine. But I love what you said about being resourceful, because truly it doesn't mean you have to invest in, I mean, you certainly can invest in lighting equipment and a fancy camera. But like you said, Sergio, I also have taken some really great, super high quality images of my work just on my phone, but I
Yeah.
happened to get it, at a moment where the lighting was just perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the new smartphones, the cameras are pretty amazing. So, and then I just put maybe a white drop cloth or a white mat board underneath, and it looks like a professional photograph. So it just comes down to being really intentional for sure.
Absolutely, intentionality is super, super important. And as a quick parenthesis on this one, since we're talking about the magazine, I'm very excited and very thankful because I will be, or I'm actually in the process, right, of curating the next issue of the Visionary Arts magazine. Tell us a little bit about that issue. I know we're still one more to share, but let's do a quick parenthesis here. Don't go anywhere, my friends. You want to listen to the last and fourth of the tips for emerging artists, but let's talk about really quickly about the magazine. So I'm very excited, Victor. I don't know about you, but I'm super excited about this, and I cannot wait to work on the final selection. So there's still time for our friends who are listening to this to submit, which the deadline is September 4th, coming up right around the corner. So tell us a little bit about this particular issue that's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so excited that you are curating issue 4 for us. I
Thank
can't
you.
even believe that it's already issue 4. But we're really excited. So New Visionary Mag, the first issue came out in January of this year, and we feature work by contemporary artists from around the world. We also highlight teaching artists in the magazine as well, because we found that so many of the artists that we feature or that we work with are also involved in teaching or sharing their knowledge in some capacity, whether they're working with children or young adults or involved in art therapy, whatever it might be. So it's a really amazing publication. We also have interviews with artists and educators and curators from around the world. We have resources in there. We have 2 really wonderful contributing writers, Erica B. Hess, who does the I Like Your Work podcast, and Rebecca Potts, who hosts the Teaching Artist podcast. And it's just really wonderful. I'm so proud of every issue that we have put out. And yeah, I'm really, really thrilled about it.
Awesome. And our friends, what's the website where they can go and submit for the 4th issue?
Yeah, so visionaryartcollective.com is where you will find all the information about submitting. And also, if you are interested in purchasing or subscribing to the magazine, all the information is there.
Awesome. Super, super. And thank you, Victoria, for sharing about that. And now let's go to the final, which is our 4th. I'm going to call them power tips, because that's what they are. They're not just ordinary tips, they're power tips for the emerging artists. So what's the number 4?
Okay, so I have the number fourth, which I'm a number fourth tip, which I'm gonna share with you in a moment. But
Mhm.
something else popped into my head, so maybe we can also have a bonus tip.
Okay, I love that.
Uh,
I love that. We'll make
because
it 4.5.
yeah, four and a half, because there's two things that I think are really important, and it was hard to kind of narrow it down.
Mhm.
Um, the fourth one is it is so important to, in addition to viewing work on iPhones or smartphones and, like on social media and on the
Mhm.
internet, it's so important to see work in person if you are able to. I know that for some artists who, the pandemic is still going on, and for some
Mhm.
artists who might be immune compromised, that is a bit of a challenge, in which
Mhm.
case, do as much as you can through social media in terms of learning about contemporary artists and visiting galleries, websites, of course. But if you are able to view work in person, it is, I think, so integral to your
Mhm.
growth as an artist
Yeah.
to just take time every month. And it's actually one of my biggest goals right now, because when I moved to New York City, I was going to the galleries on a weekly basis. And then, we all get
Mhm.
busy, and a lot of projects coming up for VAC in the magazine. I started to find myself in the past few months not really doing that as much. But what happens when you are constantly visiting contemporary art galleries and museums and looking at the work that is there? It's a different experience. I mean, it's hard to
Mhm.
even articulate it, but Sergio, I'm sure you know what I mean.
Mhm.
There's nothing like looking at work in person and seeing, work by artists
Mhm.
that is being created today. I think specifically looking at contemporary art is really
Mhm.
helpful, but then going to museums and looking at some of their permanent collections and work from the 60s, 70s, or even older than that is really important too, because no matter what you are painting or focusing on in your work, whether it is landscape or a portraiture, or perhaps you are a conceptual artist, your work is rooted in something. And to look at
Mhm.
artists who have come before you, and to really understand the ideas that have been kind of fleshed out, even before you were born, it's really important. So I think looking at historical work, looking at contemporary art, and specifically looking at both in person, because you can't see those brushstrokes on a
Mhm.
social media post half the time. That's something you can only see when you're physically there.
Yeah, I could not agree on this one more than so exciting that you bring. I really wasn't expecting, this one, this power tip, but I think it's so important. You're so correct. There are, the reality is that the pandemic, one of the things that brought is the realization that, well, maybe we don't need to go to that many places, right? Because we're just fine here in the house or in the studio, whatever we may be at. If you're able to travel or to go to places where, yeah, I mean, we need to remember what it feels like being in front of a work of art that takes your breath away, being in front of a
Yeah.
piece of artwork that just doesn't escape your mind for the next 3 days. We forget about it, that
Yeah.
because everything gets constrained to the size of a screen. At 6 foot painting the same size as a 3 inch one, because we're looking at all within the lens of the phone on the screen or the computer, and it's not the same. It's not the same. There's something about feeling surrounded by a giant work of art, or feeling so kind of also um, like immediate to a small tiny 4 by 4 small artwork or photograph or whatever it may be. There's something there that it cannot be replicated through the digital device. And I love this one, Victoria. This one really, I think it reminds me myself to, like, geez, this September is about to start.
Yeah.
I need to put some things there in my calendar, make it more intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny you say that too, because right before um, this conversation, I had my planner out and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back to doing what I did in the fall when
Hmm.
I first moved back to New York City, which is I'm going to actually schedule out days or afternoons where I go to the Chelsea galleries or the Lower East Side galleries, because it's so important. And like you said, there's only so much when the artwork gets reduced, it's so amazing that we have social media. Of course, I don't want to take anything away from that, but there's just nothing that can ever replace viewing the work in person. I think we've all had the experience of getting really emotional. I mean, I've been moved to tears looking at paintings before in a gallery or museum setting and just completely awestruck. And that has, I can see a work of art online and just fall in love with it and fall in love with the artist, but I haven't had a truly emotional experience unless I'm standing in front of a work of art that was just so moving. So I think if it's something you can do, schedule time to make that happen. That's for sure something that I'm working on too.
I love it. And I don't know, if you see this too, but I think some of the things that start to happen once you've been in the art world for a while, is like you tend to go to the shows or events where either the person who's showing or somebody who's going to be there, and that's kind of how you pick and choose kind of where to go. But it's also, I think, a really good idea it's great to support your friends and your art community for sure, but also be intentional about going to places where you have no idea who the artist is, you have no idea what the show is about, so that you have those moments of like, wow, I just found an artist that I didn't know was around in the world, and I'm now so excited to see.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you, Sergio, that is actually the only way I have ever gone to shows. Is I just show up, I choose a district. So I'll say, okay, today I'm going to go to Chelsea, or I'm going to go to the Lower East Side, and I'll just set aside, 3 hours, and I'll go in without researching anything. I never look anything up ahead of time because I never want it to sway me. And if I don't look up anything ahead of time, then I'm just so surprised. And I love walking in and seeing one of my favorite artists, but I didn't know that they were showing. So it makes it such a special experience, but also it keeps your mind open. Because I think sometimes if we, look up the galleries ahead of time, and the way the work might look on their website might be different than when you see it in person, of course. So that way you're just completely going in with an open mind, and it's always magical when you do that.
Exactly. You're ready to be surprised.
Exactly.
Awesome. So you have an extra point there. You have a bonus power tip. So what is that one?
I do. And it just popped into my brain as we were, having this conversation. I thought, oh my goodness, I should probably share this because I think it's important, which is that in the age that we live in now, it's, I think, really one of the best times for artists, if not the best time, with social media, with having a website and email and all of these tools at our fingertips. And so, it's different than how it was in the 90s or even the early 2000s, when you'd have to bring your portfolio around to different galleries. And I think a lot of that mindset was kind of, in-person networking, which is still important. But that was really one of the only ways, was to network in person, or to kind of hope that someone would take a chance on you and discover you. But now we live in a we're in a position, I think many artists are, where in this digital age, we have a lot more power and control. And with that, we can really kind of build our own collector base. There's a lot we can do on our own now, so that if we connect with a gallery, it's kind of an added bonus, but it's not the only option it's not the only pathway to success anymore. And I'm all for, if you connect with a gallery that really supports your work, I think that's such a beautiful relationship. And I have been represented by galleries in the past, that one gallery in particular that I just really adored. But there's so much we can do now as well. And one of those things that I wanted to just mention is, in addition to social media marketing, email marketing, building an email list, because that is completely in your control. And that's how you can build up a collector base and connect with potential collectors and curators and people in the art world, or even just people who are interested in what you're doing. So I think if we have this mindset, and Sergio, I think I heard you say this once, which really resonated with me. You said, it's not about finding galleries or collectors, it's about attracting, galleries and collectors. It's like a mindset shift that's really important. And So if we shift our mindset into thinking, you know what, there's so much I can actually do. I don't have to wait for anyone to take a chance on me or prove myself. But what can I do right now? I can start an email list. I've spoken with artists before who say, well, I only have 15,
Mhm.
subscribers on my newsletter. And I say to them, that could be 15 sales. Imagine if you sold
Mhm.
15 paintings.
Mhm.
So really, there's a lot that goes with this idea of really building your own art career. But I think that starting an email list and kind of getting into email marketing is out in addition to the social media piece is a really great way to start building those connections and yeah, I would recommend it to every artist out there.
I love that. I love that. Yes, absolutely. I love that. Yes, email list building something that should be a constant, right? Something to be in our toolbox of marketing options that we have. Something that we need to keep talking about, thinking about, because it's super important. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking. Yeah, I think what I was referring is exactly what you said. The old question: how do I find art collectors? But what if we reverse the question of because collectors are always looking, what am I doing so that collectors find me, right? And kind of
Yeah.
reversing our mindset to that idea that there's so much that you can be in control of, and taking more of that control in our hands. I love that, and anytime that we have more control, then we can operate in our own terms. And we have seen, I'm sure you have seen, artists who lost their Instagram account because it was hacked, or Instagram decides to close down your account, and all the followers that you have been working on, if you never took the time to build an email list, it's gone in overnight. And the email is the only list that you own. All the other ones are rented property that we are able to use, but it's not ours. The day Instagram is gone, so all my followers who are there,
Yeah.
etc. So it's a playground we go in to play with others, but it's not our own playground. So when you create
Yeah.
your email list, you're bringing people to your playground, and you make the rules, and you have control of that, which is that's a really good one. I think that's not a 4.5 tip. That's a 5 in itself. I think that should be all in itself. That's got the weight of a full power tip. So instead of 4, I would make it five.
Yeah.
5 power tips. I think it's really good, and it's a great way to also kind of look at the whole picture of this. We started on these. I've been writing them down, starting from the first one with aligning your practice through your true self, finding your authentic voice. That's what happens inside the studio. And I love how we end then with the marketing piece and connecting to others, and things like that, right? Starting from the inside out. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Then number 2 was the working in collections or series at the same time, having or other ways in which we can explore ideas that come along the way. Number 3 was to think about how you present your art to the world, how you present yourself to the world in this age, 2022, 2023, as time goes by, how the world changes, being an adaptable artist. Number 4 is, see art in person. I love that one, particularly super good. See work in person. And then the big bonus, number 5, to work in our email list, on a constant basis, because that's something that we own, and that's something that, we have control of. So those have been really awesome, Victoria. That's super good. Thank you so much. I mean, we've been chatting for almost an hour. It's been really great chatting with you. But before we go, there's also some really good news that I want to share with our friends. One is that you guys are about to start your own podcast. Woohoo. So tell us
Yeah.
a bit about that. What's the premise of the podcast? When does it kick off? And anything you want to share about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. I'm so excited. I've been wanting to launch a podcast for a while now, and I was kind of waiting, for a good time. And then I realized there's never going to be a
Mm-hmm.
perfect time. So I'm just going to
Right.
go ahead and launch.
Mm-hmm.
But our podcast, the New Visionary Podcast, is going to be released this Thursday, September 1st. And I'm really seeing it as a space to have conversations just like this, where I can engage with inspirational artists, curators, educators, authors, creative entrepreneurs, and just to hold space for these conversations, because it's a beautiful thing I think that happens through podcasts, which is that the individuals who are having the podcast conversation are learning and growing from each other. And then they're sharing that knowledge with their listeners who are also learning and growing. And so it's just this really beautiful cycle of learning and knowledge sharing. And it's something that I'm really looking forward to being a part of.
That's awesome. And how can our friends subscribe to it? Tell us exactly the launch date and how can our friends can find more about be ready for episode number 1.
Yeah. So on September 1st, we are going to release the first 2 episodes to iTunes, Spotify, really anywhere that podcasts are streamed. You can find it just by typing in New Visionary Podcast. And if you follow us on Instagram at Visionary Art Collective, we're going to really promote it and share all of the information there as well.
Awesome. Super. Can't wait. It's going to be good. It's going to be added to my subscriptions of podcasts. I'm a big podcast person. I love podcasting. When I'm washing the dishes, I'm listening to a podcast. When I'm walking the dog, I'm listening to a podcast. And it's just fun. It feels like you take the person with you wherever you go, the person that you're listening to. And I like to download a variety of podcasts on all the different interests that I have, art and non-art related. And it's just fun. It's just really great way to give company to somebody through podcasting. So just as we are doing in this episode, you and me, maybe, I don't know, maybe we were in the company of somebody who was doing their laundry today. That was awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
We turn a laundry day into a good, awesome day with 5 power tips to do for their art career. So that's great.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
And
So
Victoria, where
true.
can our friends can connect with you as well before we?
Yeah. So you can find us at, so on Instagram, we are Visionary Art Collective and also New Visionary Mag. So we have 2 Instagrams, one that is just for our general platform, and New Visionary Mag is specific to the magazine. And then you can also go to our website, visionaryartcollective.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Victoria, for your time. Thank you. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Your podcast is going to be awesome. It's going to be great. I just know it. And, I look forward to connecting with you very soon for the New Vision magazine, edition number 4. That's coming out very soon. So keep guys a look out for that. It's going to be exciting. And I look forward to connecting with you again.
Thank you so much, Sergio. I really appreciate it. Always love chatting with you. And thank you so much to everyone who tuned in today.
Thank you, Victoria. And to all the friends listening right now, if you enjoyed this episode, if you were doing laundry or you were in your studio, or whatever you were doing today, and you had and if we had the opportunity to give you company, please do us a big favor. Victoria and I will be so happy if you share this episode with your friends. If you share in social media, make sure to tag us as well so we can personally thank you for that. Please connect with us online. And thank you again. We'll see you in the next level. Goodbye.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.